This is Israel Take 3, and I'm David Began. This season has generously been sponsored by the Sclair Family Foundation. Stick with us.
My family is very Haredi. I grew up I went to
Mayer Alper is 24, and he grew up here in Jerusalem. And his parents came here in their early 20s, and they became religious, Haredi, very Haredi, as he said. Today, Mayer lives with his wife, Liron, in Male Adumim, which is a small town between Jerusalem and the Dead Sea.
They have one sweet boy named Adir. He is 2.5 now, and we are expecting our second boy now.
His sweet boy, Adir, hasn't seen much of his father since he was born. Mayer has spent more than 320 days in Miluim, Army Reserves, since the war began on October 7th. When I met him, it was at this makeshift camp, perched on this little hill that looked straight over Gaza City. We sat on folding chairs in the dust at an undisclosed location, waiting for his next rescue mission, and both of us were hoping that it wouldn't come in the middle of our conversation. If you listen carefully, you can hear in the background the rattle of machine gun fire, the deep thud of artillery, and the roar of helicopters. What you can't hear, but I could see from there, were the heavy black clouds of smoke rising into the sky after each boom. I can't tell you exactly where his location was, but I can tell you this: it's less than a mile from the Gaza border. And tomorrow, if all goes planned, Mayer will finally go home to see Liron, to hold his Adir, the sweet boy. And Mayer, with his dark hair and tall, strong build, looks like the poster image of a rugged IDF soldier. His uniform is creased from days in the field. Behind him, jeeps and sandbags and the steady hum of the base at night. But then he smiles, and suddenly he's not that soldier from the poster at all. He's a soft-spoken, sincere young man with a sweetness about him, and a heaviness too, the burden of a story that he carries on his shoulders. Oh, and when he's not in uniform, he's a student studying biomed at Hebrew University. But that feels like a world away from the hilltop where we sat. You have a lot to do, and at any moment you might get called out for a mission, so I don't want to take too much time. I hope not to. Our listeners can't see this. I wish they could. We're sitting in a forest. It's getting dark. The sun has set. It's actually a beautiful night. The sounds that you hear going by are mostly army vehicles. I'm just looking over the ridge, and I'm looking into Gaza right now. What are you doing here? What's going on?
From October 7, that it was 1 month after I finished my regular service. So October 7 happened, and I joined this combat medical unit. We are a medical team. Our mission is to provide care and to treat soldiers that got wounded, to treat them and then evacuate them. So this is actually my 320 day in Miluim service, reserve service. I hope it's now at the last time, but who knows? And here we are between near Oz and the Gaza Strip, providing care and assistance to 98.
How many lives have you saved in 320 days, or been a part of?
So I saw a lot of wounded soldiers, and sadly dead too. I will assume around 70, 80, something like that.
Wow.
From the beginning, maybe. It's hard to count.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to break a major rule of podcast journalism over here for a minute, and I'm going to tell you what you're supposed to be asking right now. So Mayer says he grew up in a very Haredi home, right? Now, anyone following the news in Israel knows that Haredim don't serve in the army, right? Well, not exactly. Yes, it's generally not a thing. Haredim, or as the media calls them, ultra-Orthodox, which is a very misleading term, by the way, for the most part are not serving in the IDF. And this is a very hot-button political issue here. But as is the case with almost everything in this tiny country, It's just not that simple. So let's talk about Haredim and the army. Because these questions, why don't they serve, how many should serve, how many actually do serve, they keep coming up over and over again. So here's the reality right now. The Supreme Court ruled that the state must draft Haredi yeshiva students. The IDF sent out almost 19,000 draft orders this past year. 5%, or just under 1,000 guys, showed up. And of those, only 232 are currently in uniform. So how many Haredi guys are we talking about? 18 to 24, draft age, not in uniform, benefiting from the old Ben Gurion exemption, which, by the way, ran out in April of 2024. The number is 80,000. Back in 1948, Ben Gurion granted exemptions for just over 400 yeshiva students, which was kind of a symbolic gesture to preserve Torah learning after the Holocaust. He supposedly said it wouldn't really matter anyway because within a decade, there won't be any more Haredim. Spoiler alert, he definitely was not a prophet. By the 1960s, he was already writing regretfully that the numbers had mushroomed. And you know who feels the most resentment about this whole thing? People like Liron, Mayer's wife, who can't help but wonder why her 2.5-year-old sweet boy, Adir, has barely ever seen his father, because he's been serving in reserve duty for over 320 days, when there are tens of thousands of young unmarried men who seem to get off scot-free. Today I saw this story. Military police raid the home of a 20-year-old yeshiva student in Netivot. He's home for a family celebration. They come to arrest him, and he jumps off the porch and just bolts. The police are looking for him. And then I scroll down and see this one. So it turns out on the same day, 30 more Haredim were stopped at Ben Gurion Airport on their way to Uman in the Ukraine for Rosh Hashanah to celebrate at the grave of Rabbi Nachman from Breslov. And instead of boarding the plane, they're herded onto a bus to Tel HaShomer base. And by nightfall, they're facing trial. And then the politicians weigh in, of course. So Goldknopf, who's the head of United Torah Judaism, he fires off a letter to Bibi Netanyahu demanding their release. And it's not just a letter, it's this whole moral plea. He's saying Torah scholars are being arrested, families are being harassed on the eve of Rosh Hashanah. At least let them out for the Chagim, the holidays, so they can be with their families, Goldknopf argues. And that, of course, sparked more fury. Yora Wiegler from the National Religious Reservist Forum shoots back. We haven't celebrated holidays at home for 2 years. We've prayed on bases and in the fields or in homes in Gaza. While soldiers are giving up their lives, you were silent. And then you scroll down to the comments. And this is where it gets really good. Someone named Chava writes, they weren't going to celebrate with their families anyway. They were on their way to Uman. Point taken. Ossie Gunner, yes, that's his name, says if they won't defend their families, they shouldn't be able to celebrate the Chagim with them. Plus, there are 900 families of fallen soldiers who will never get that opportunity. Ouch. Along those lines, someone else writes, there are thousands of reservists in Gaza who won't come home either. Their unit will be their family for the Chagim. Not everyone's piling it on. Fagi jumps in with a little history lesson. She reminds the readers why the exemptions were granted in the first place. After the Holocaust, so many yeshiva students had been wiped out, and there was a need to preserve the Torah world. And finally, a really snarky one from someone called Kolel Wife. Keep them in prison for Rosh Hashanah. If Goldknopf feels bad for them, let him go to prison and lead their services. It's all there. Anger, sarcasm, guilt, theology, history, and reading it, you can feel the gap. One side seeing these arrests as an attack on the Torah itself, and the other seeing them as the bare minimum of fairness. So what happened with Mayer? How did he go from being very, very Haredi to hardcore combat soldier? Let's go back to his story. He continued through the Haredi system, went to all the Haredi schools, and did exactly what he was supposed to do, which was mainly one thing: study the Talmud, or the Gemara, as it's called, and to be a yeshiva bacher, which is the term for somebody whose life is spent inside the study halls of Jewish text. And he did this until he was 17, and he couldn't do it anymore.
And then I feel that that is like enough for me. I don't want to sit all day and learn Gemara. And I felt in a certain point in my life that I want to choose my own path.
I want to choose my own path. Now, that seems like something that most of us would see as a completely reasonable and healthy thing for a 17-year-old young man to want to do. The problem for Mayer was that his path had been chosen for him, and it wasn't the path that he wanted for himself. So he makes the painful decision. He's moving out. He's going to go at it on his own.
So I left my parents' home for two main reasons. The first one is that if I want to seek my own path, I need to have my like a freedom to choose what I want and not what they want. And the second one is to avoid conflicts, because in a Haredi community, a son that will go out from the path that they want him to go, it could make trouble for the shidduchim, for the brothers, and make embarrass the family. So I step aside.
Shidduchim, like...
Matchmaker, matchmaker, look through your book and make me a perfect match. Matchmaker, matchmaker, I'll bring the fame.
But not exactly. So, Shidduchim, think of it as Tinder or maybe J-Date. But instead of apps, you've got a shadchan, a middleman who knows a guy, who knows a cousin, who knows your aunt's neighbor. And instead of swiping right, you meet in a hotel lobby and you talk about your families and you make lots of polite small talk and maybe some awkward tea. And if it goes well, you meet again. And if not, don't worry. There's always another match waiting in the shadchan's Rolodex. But seriously, Shidduchim is the traditional Jewish matchmaking system where a middle person, it could be a family member, someone in the community, introduces potential partners, often with resumes and references, in a structured process aimed at marriage rather than casual dating. And in the Haredi world, Shidduchim are taken very seriously. You don't joke about them, you don't play around with them, they're everything. Anything that could hurt your kid's chances at getting a good shidduch is catastrophic, worse than the plague. And one of those things that can really ruin the possibility of a good shidduch for your kids, if a sibling has stepped outside of the Orthodox life, or worse, if a brother has actually gone and joined the IDF, chas v'shalom, God forbid. Because in the world of shidduchim, an IDF uniform is a scarlet letter. So Mayer left home. He found some new friends, he rented an apartment, he worked various jobs, and tried to create a new world for himself. But all alone and cut off from his past, he was confused and a bit scared. He had no hard form, as he calls it, no structure to make sense out of his life.
So this is the first main reason why I joined the army. I seeked for a hard form that will put me in a good track, a positive track that will open for me the world to do kind of what I want, and to really provide me a community and a clear guidance for what I want to do in my life. The second one is that I looked around me and I saw for the first time the world outside the Haredi community, and I saw that every boy, when he gets to 18, he joins the army to protect the country and the nation, and I have no excuse why I will not do that. This is my duty, no matter what will be the ramification of that.
So Mayer decides to join an IDF unit called Chetz. It means arrow, but it's also a play on words. It's short for Haredi Tzanchanim, the Haredi paratroopers, a combat battalion inside the IDF's paratrooper brigade built specifically for young Haredi men who want to serve, but also want to keep their religious way of life intact. I mean, you've got to give the IDF credit for that. They're trying to accommodate Haredi soldiers as much as possible. There are a number of these all-Haredi units in the army. Kosher food, time for daily prayer, and, most importantly, not co-ed. Chet started back in 2016 with just a handful of recruits. And today there are hundreds of alumni, officers, company commanders, more coming in every draft cycle. They keep Shabbat, they keep kosher, they pray in a minyan, and then they train alongside the rest of the paratroopers. So for guys like Mayer, these units are a godsend. They allow young men who grew up in these religious homes to serve the nation without having to compromise who they are. You can wear the uniform, jump out of planes, go into Gaza, and still be the same Haredi kid who grew up davening in a yeshiva. So you're a paratrooper.
Yeah.
Did you jump out of a plane?
Of course.
Twice?
3 times.
3 times.
Once at night, I was the first to jump. So I hold myself.
Was that scary as hell? Like, what was that?
It's crazy. It's totally crazy, but it's fun. Like in the sky, there's a completely silence, and you have a minute and a half to like be at the air until people will like shout from from down, kapel et haraglayim, fold your legs, like to start to go to the ground.
Wow.
So yeah, it was amazing experience.
So tell me, let's talk a little bit about what was hard about this for you. What was the hardest part? What happened when you told your parents? What was that moment like? How did they react? When you were in the army, were you able to come home at all during those years? Was the community accepting of you? Were your parents accepting of you, your friends? Tell us a little bit about that.
So unfortunately, in my case, it was very hard for my parents. They had trouble accepting me as I am. From then, we start to disagree about my path in life, and like the extreme part was around my serving in the army. My mom will send me a voice message and crying, begging me not to do that, and telling me that if I will do so, I will not be part of the family and things like that. So that was hard, very hard for me. But the main thing that was hard for me and is hard for my friends is to be alone. The loneliness, it's hard. It's very hard.
And how does that feel? What does it feel like to be a young man whose parents are telling them, if you do this, you can't come home. If you make this choice, you're not welcome here anymore. And tell us more about like what were some of the hardest things about that whole journey for you.
So there is not one single reason. It's a lot of community pressure, and more than that, I think it's a fear for my brothers, that they were afraid that if I will choose that, they will go after me. And the one most important thing for the Haredi community is to keep their persons and the Shiva Bochers inside the Haredi community, that they will not go out.
I can't even imagine. What does that feel like? Your mom leaves you a message, crying, begging you not to join the army, and including an ultimatum that if you do, you're no longer welcome in our home.
It's a very hard feeling of very loneliness, to go through a very tough training alone. It's very hard. Also financially, it's hard, because you need to finance yourself, provide yourself everything. If you need to work, if it's through through the Chayal Boded, the army provides you. It's tough to celebrate holidays alone. A lot of loneliness.
How about your friends? Your friends from the yeshiva, did they stand by you and support your decision, and were they proud of you, or did they also feel that it was dangerous to remain associated with you?
So most of them felt like it's very, very dangerous to be in contact with me. Like they were afraid maybe I will, I convince them to do so. Most of my friends I am not in touch until now.
During his army service, Mayer barely spoke to his parents. On breaks, when other soldiers packed up and went home, he'd stay on base. Holidays came and went, and he spent them alone or with a friend's family. At home, the message remained clear. As long as you wear that IDF uniform, you aren't welcome. Mayer was officially labeled a lone soldier. Now, when most of us think of lone soldiers, we picture that kid from Teaneck or Northbrook, the one who grew up in a Jewish day school, came here on a gap year, and then surprised everyone by joining the IDF. And that's true. Those kids are lone soldiers. But there's another part of the picture that we don't see. Lone soldier also means the Israeli kid with no one waiting for him at home, the orphan, or the boy cut off from his family, the boy who can't go home because home has locked its doors. Half of Israel's 7,000 lone soldiers are these Sabras, and Mayer was one of them. No ties to his family, no connection, just alone. But then his service ended. No more uniform, no more scarlet letter, and something shifted for Mayer. He got married, he had Adir, and suddenly the idea of raising his son without grandparents, without that bridge to family, it was unbearable. So he did something he never thought he would do. He reached out.
After I got married, I started a process of reconnecting with them. It was very important for me, especially to do that. And it was step by step. And now that I have a son, that he's their grandson, so we try to see them once a month or so, and we are still inside the process. Like I can say physically, it's maybe very much easy to go, to stay there, but emotionally it's harder. But I'm doing a lot of efforts to reconnect in a good way.
How are you dealing with that feeling of resentment to them, to the people of your community that when you made this decision, abandoned you in a sense?
So I very much trying to, I don't know if there's a correct word in English, to dan lekaf zchut.
Yeah, to judge them favorably.
Like to judge them favorably, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, because in the end of the day, my parents, when they start to be more religious and to become ultra orthodox, so there were a lot of rabbis that tried to guide them through that. They give him advice and guidance to be very, very extremist about that thing. Like me going to serve in the army, and I think that inside of them there is a lot of pain that they cannot accept me like I was, and I see that pain. So they are in a conflict. From one side, they love me and they want to be supportive, and the other side, they need to hear the rabbis what I say, and they are concerned about my other brothers and sisters, what they will go through doing shidduchim. So that is a thing that giving me power and certain amount of relief to do that process to reconnect with them.
So you're trying to judge them favorably. You're trying to give them, look at it in a positive way and understand where they're coming from, which is amazing. I mean, that's really that's unusual. It's very mature.
Thank you. I think it's important.
It is important. Of course, it's important. And like you said, they're coming from where they're coming from, and from where they're coming from, it didn't make sense for you to go into the army. And after our talk, I kept thinking about it, turning it over in my head again and again. Why would good parents do this? And I don't mean that in a judgy kind of way. I mean it like genuinely. And what was it like for them to make this decision? So I came up with a plan, a terrible plan. What if I called his dad? I know, it's awful. But in my head, it seemed noble. Give Shlomo a chance to explain himself in his own words, to maybe even find some closure. So I text Mayer with the idea, and he writes back 2 words, good luck, which, depending upon how you read that, could mean good luck, I hope it works, or like good luck, you absolute moron. But then he sends me his father's number.
Hello.
Hello, is Shlomo there, please?
Yes, this is Shlomo.
Hi, Shlomo. My name is David Began. I'm friends with your son, Mayer. Just reaching out to... So I spoke with Shlomo for a few minutes. He was warm, very polite, and he says he's going to think about it, which to me sounded like progress. And maybe I'd stumbled upon the breakthrough moment for a family drama. Maybe we'll get a window into a world that we struggle to understand. So I texted Mayer with what I thought was the good news, and he writes back, don't get your hopes up. He'll ask his rabbi, and then he'll tell you no. And he was right. 2 days later, Shlomo calls me back. He'd asked his rabbi, and the answer was no. I tried. I begged. I may have even groveled a little bit. He wished me a Shana Tova, Happy New Year, and the window was shut. I left a message for Mayer. Hi, Mayer. I just wanted to let you know that I did reach out to your father, and he decided that he was not going to speak on the podcast, but he was very sweet and very warm, and I know I could tell from his voice that feels proud of you and that he loves you, and it's not at all about that. I just think he just doesn't feel comfortable discussing it, publicly. And then Mayer sends one back.
Hi, David. I'm sorry to hear that this is what was my father's response. Although I pretty much expected to be that way. Of course, he is a good man with a good heart, but he chose to follow the rabbis blindly, with no self-criticism, and whatever they will tell him, this is what he will do. This is really represent what I went through with him over the years, but I'm glad that at least we tried.
Now I just felt terrible, like I'd made things so much worse, and maybe I'd opened up wounds that were finally starting to heal. So I wrote Mayer this long apology, and he texted me back, Hakol beseder, achi, which means, it's all good, my brother, which is probably the Israeli way of saying, don't worry about it, but please don't ever do something that stupid again. So without Shlomo's side of the story, I still had this itch. I just wanted to understand it a little better. So I came up with another idea, and this one was a little less terrible. Hello? Rabbi.
Hello, David, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Welcome home.
Thank you, looking good.
I reached out to a friend of mine, Rabbi Yeshua Pfeffer. He's a community rabbi here in Remote, and he heads something called the Iyun Institute, which does a lot of work around integrating Haredim into Israeli society. And he edits a journal of Haredi thought called Tzarech Iyun. Basically, he lives inside that world, but he's also constantly thinking about how it connects to the bigger Israeli story. He speaks the language, he lives the life. He's not like me parachuting in with my microphone and my theories. So I asked him to do something very unrealistic. Okay, so Rabbi, I'm going to ask you to do something it's really not fair for me to ask you to do this. It's kind of an impossible task, but we were not able to get in touch with Mayer's father. He wasn't interested in speaking to us. And it's really important for us to understand a little bit about where he might be coming from and try to understand his perspective and his family's perspective, his wife's perspective a little bit. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you can, you don't have to imitate his accent because we wouldn't want to lose your great British accent, but if you can role play a little bit with me for a minute and be Mayer's father and answer the following questions for me. Can you explain to me a little bit about what this process was like for you, how you made this decision to tell your son that if while he was serving in the army, he wasn't welcome to come home, and the challenges, the difficulties of making that choice, the struggles that you felt and that you faced with it, and how you ultimately came to the decision that you did, and try to help us to understand a little bit why you had to make this decision, which I'm sure was not an easy one.
Thank you, David, for the question. I appreciate your sensitivity and the attempt to also get the perspective of the parent. There's a huge discrepancy between the overarching ideal in Western society, which is autonomy, individualism, self-realization, and so on, and the ideal in the Haredi space, which is following the community norms, being a part of a society, a faith community, where the norms are dictated by rabbinic leaders, and you follow those norms. Meaning, it's much less about individual free will and making a choice, and much more about conforming. And now, all of a sudden, our children, or one of them, is undermining that journey, undermining that choice. How is he undermining it? Because he's going against the social norms. If a child, let's say, decides to go to the army, then that will affect the status of the family within the Haredi fold in terms of will the other children be accepted into institutions. Don't forget, the ultimate is that your children will marry within the Haredi space, will get good shidduchim with strong, firm Haredi families. When one of the kids is in the army, then that undermines the shidduch prospects. It's going to make a real change for this family. And like I said, for them, this is why we're here. We made the ultimate choice. How can you, our son Mayer, betray those core values of what our family is all about? How can you do that to us?
At this point, Rabbi Pfeffer adds another layer, a sort of wrinkle in Mayer's story and really his parent situation, which makes things even more complicated and honestly a lot more interesting. It wasn't just the usual clash of values or the stock narrative of a Haredi kid in a uniform. For his parents, there was something particular, something different at play.
Mayer's parents are Baalei Tshuva. Baalei Tshuva means that they're people who came in to Haredi Judaism from the outside. They were not born and bred, not what we call sometimes FFBs, from birth, grew up Orthodox or as part of a Haredi society, but rather they moved in. And that often places them in a very fragile place, in a place that lacks confidence, in a place that they feel that they need to cement, they need to strengthen their belonging to Haredi society. Let me tell you a little bit about that mindset. From their perspective, they've made the ultimate choice, which also comes with great sacrifice. They've made the choice to abandon all of the pleasantness, all of the fun, all of the kind of benefits of belonging to Western individualistic society, and to give those up in favor of the truth with a capital T. So they abandon everything they've had in the past, and they adopt really headlong, all the way, the ideals of Haredi life.
Thank you, Rabbi Pfeffer. And again, just it's what you're doing and the work that you're doing is incredible thing. It's a beautiful, important role that you're playing, and I'm proud to have you as a friend and as a rabbi and to live in the neighborhood together, and I look forward to our future talks.
Thank you, David. I appreciate your sensitivity in coming to me with this issue.
Mayer and I parted ways in that clearing in the forest. But before we did, he grabbed me for a hug, sort of like he needed to hold on to something solid for a second. And I wondered if talking it all out and dragging his story into the open had somehow shifted something for him, even slightly. For me, I was ready to get out of there. The forest had become too dark, too close to the raging battle in Gaza. I pulled my car out fast, ready to see something that looked familiar. But then my phone buzzed. Damn, a rocket alert. So without thinking, I turned the car around. Being back there with Mayer and his crew in full gear, it just felt safer than being out here alone in the middle of nowhere with nowhere to duck. So a few minutes later, all clear, I pulled out and I didn't look back. So Mayer's story doesn't clean up neatly. He's a Haredi kid who broke from the script of his world, choosing a path that left him stranded between two places and belonging to neither. And it cost him. Family dinners that go stiff as soon as he walks in. Old friends who don't call him anymore, and the weight of being an outlier. But still, he's there, 320 days in reserve service, putting on the uniform, standing in the dirt, saving lives. There's no tidy arc here, no moral to underline. Just a young man trying to figure out where he stands in a world that won't make it simple. Courage doesn't always look like triumph. Sometimes it just sits there, raw and unresolved. So out there with Mayer, it was clear. His story doesn't end in resolution. It lingers, unsettled, kind of like the way life does.